And now, to begin the discussion on the country programs of India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka, I invite the delegates to request the floor, and I give the floor now to the distinguished representative, His Excellency, Permanent Representative of uh, Sri Lanka, my friend Pieris. Thank you very much. You have the floor, Mohan.
Thank you, Ambassador Rodrigo. That's very kind of you and such a pleasure to be with you once again. Thank you. I was listening to the report presented on Sri Lanka by His Excellency Lai Ajay. I thank him for such a comprehensive report and to capture the scenario pretty accurately, which he did. Let me just say just a few things in addition to what he said. I do realize the UNICEF has identified 4 strategic priorities, and that is the inclusive and equitable human development and well-being. Secondly, the resilient and green recovery and growth for shared prosperity and environmental sustainability. And then we have social cohesion and inclusive governance and justice, and finally, gender equality. And I thank Ajay for capturing these very important features that have to be addressed as a matter of urgency. Now, we know that Sri Lanka has achieved steady progress towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals since the first, for a long time, since 2018, despite the attacks caused by despite the setbacks, perhaps caused by COVID. Now, this is evident from the country's improved score and global ranking in the 2022 Sustainable Development Report, which places the country score as 70, well above the regional average of 65.9, notwithstanding the present crisis, which I say is unprecedented due to a combination of factors that have played in, perhaps a lot of factors, a lot of strong bad factors playing in and coming into unison during perhaps a bad time when the whole planet perhaps is going through difficult times. So the country has also achieved, as you know, a greater integration of SDGs in national policies. The current national the policy framework also envisages the public investment programs for 2021 and 24, and the updated national determined contributions indices submitted to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, all of which set the country's strategy development framework on perhaps an enhanced trajectory and alignment with the SDGs. Now, Ambassador, a strengthened institutional framework and capacities for SDG governance, coordination, and the monitoring has been enabled with the establishment of the Sustainable Development Council of Sri Lanka, which is the SDCSL, in terms of the Sri Lanka Sustainable Development Act 19 of 2017, as a dedicated government agency and increased ownership of the 2030 agenda by all other stakeholders. Since 2018, we know that the country was faced with the 2019 Easter Sunday terror attacks and the COVID-19 pandemic, which has had perhaps a devastating effect, especially on the economy. Now, you will therefore see Sri Lanka has, notwithstanding, performed exceptionally well with regard to, as I said earlier, the COVID-19 pandemic. The vaccination drive exceeds the World Health Organization targets, achieving a coverage of 97% for the first dose, 82% for the second, 55% for the third, respectively for those above the age of 12 years. In addition, the government's cash transfer program in response to COVID-19 impacts on social welfare, the attainment of significant expansion horizontally and vertically with prompt increases in the coverage of social protection. Now, the government has also successfully collaborated in resource mobilization across various sectors, such as education, reprogramming the funded projects to facilitate online learning, as I discussed this with His Excellency RJ, and healthcare, harnessing healthcare and medical needs of identified vulnerable groups in the grassroots level. Now, the existing welfare policies implemented by successive governments in ensuring universal free access to healthcare, education, and social protection for the poor and the vulnerable enable the government to swiftly scale up those efforts amidst the outbreak. So these successes highlight the government's capacity and the competency, the capability to respond to emerging challenges, and its potential for translating lessons learned from those collaborative efforts towards effective medium and long-term policy implementation. Now, however, Sri Lanka, similar to other developing countries in the region, is faced with challenges of an unprecedented kind presently. Challenges to the economy resulting from the pandemic and the movement of restriction significantly impeded the economic activity, particularly tourism. Now, whilst emerging from the far-reaching impacts caused by the pandemic and other factors, Sri Lanka believes and envisions an inclusive transformation towards a sustainable developed nation for all of us, with specific policy commitments made towards economic diversification, building on a blue economy, achieving knowledge-based and technology-driven transformation, and social inclusivity. Now, the government aims to support this transformation through public sector reforms combined with innovation and strengthened law enforcement, protection, and human rights of all citizens, addressing, of course, not to forget, to address climate change. However, the country, we realize that the existing challenges and systemic and structural barriers to achieving this vision is not easy. The frequent changes in the policy landscape, with the disconnect between lawmaking and policy making, perhaps, the fragmented nature of the country's data landscape, and the absence of a clear monitoring and evaluation framework to assess the impacts of past policy interventions are eminent challenges faced by the government. So there we are. That's fundamentally where we are. So finally, I would say the establishment of clear mechanisms to identify, engage, and target marginalized and vulnerable groups through the policy interventions addressing the persistent inequalities facilitated through the development of constructive multi-stakeholder participation in the policy planning process and the implementation process, in my view, would be vital. So here we are. I thank you. I thank the UNICEF to joining hands with us to lift us from this great difficult situation that we are in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Mohan Pieris, distinguished colleague. And now, as I announced,